Hey everybody, I was gonna read a little bit from a book called Return from Tomorrow by George G. Ritchie with Elizabeth Sherrill. And it's basically about a dude who's in the military and I look like shit. And he gets sick and he goes to the infirmary and he ends up getting even more sick and he has pneumonia and he essentially has a near-death experience. And so yeah, this book so far, the writings that I'm reading in it is all about what he witnessed in his near-death experience. And I thought it was pretty amazing, so I wanted to share it with you guys. Slowly, I crept forward, eyes riveted on the hand, on that hand. There was something terrible about it. Even in the dim night light, I could see that it was too white, too smooth. Where had I seen a hand like that before? Then I remembered Papa Dabney lying in the parlor at Ma's side. I backed toward the doorway. The man in this bed was dead. I felt the same reluctance I had the previous time at being in a room with a dead person, but if that was my ring, then it was me, the separated part of me lying under that sheet. Did that mean that I was... It was the first time in the entire experience that the word death occurred to me in connection with what was happening. But I wasn't dead. How could I be dead and still be awake? Thinking, experiencing. Death was different. Death was, I don't know, blanking out, nothingness. I was me, wide awake, only without a physical body to function in. Frantically, I clawed at the sheet, trying to draw it back, trying to uncover the figure on the bed. All my efforts did not even stir a breeze in the silent little room. At last, in despair, I sank down on the bed, or did so mentally. Actually, my disembodied being made no contact with it. There, right there, was my own shape and substance, yet as distant from me as though we inhabited separate planets. Was this what death was? This separation of one part of a person from the rest of him? I wasn't sure when the lights in the room began to change. Suddenly, I was aware that it was brighter, a lot brighter than it had been. I whirled to look at the night light on the bedside table. Surely a single 15-watt bulb couldn't turn out that much light. I stared in astonishment as the brightness increased, coming from nowhere, seeming to shine everywhere at once. All the light bulbs in the ward couldn't give off that much light. All the bulbs in the world couldn't. It was impossibly bright. It was like a million welders' lamps all blazing at once. And right in the middle of my amazement came a prosaic thought, probably born of some biology lecture back in the university. I'm glad I didn't have a physical eyes at this moment, I thought. This light would destroy the retina in a tenth of a second. No, I corrected myself, not the light. He would be too bright to look at. For now I was that it was... Oh wait, hold on. For now I saw that it was not light, but a man who had entered the room. Or rather, a man made of light, though this seemed no more possible to my mind than the incredible intensity of the brightness that made up his form. They use a capital H for his too, just to let you know. The instant I perceived him, a command formed itself in my mind. Stand up. The words came from inside me, yet they had an authority my mere thoughts had never had. My mere thoughts had never had. Okay, I got to my feet, and as I did came this stupendous certainty: you are in the presence of the Son of God. Again, the concept seemed to form itself inside me, but not as thought or speculation. It was a kind of knowing, immediate and complete. I knew other facts about him too. One, that this was the most totally male being I had ever met. If this was the Son of God, then his name was Jesus. But this was not the Jesus of my Sunday school books. This Jesus was gentle, kind. That Jesus was gentle, kind, understanding, and probably a little bit of a weakling. This person was power itself, older than time, and yet more modern than anyone I had ever met. It's a lot like Joshua. I mean, it is anyway. Above all, with that same mysterious inner certainty, I knew that this man loved me. for far more ever than power. What emanated from this presence was unconditional love, an astonishing love, a love beyond my wildest imagining. This love knew every unlovable thing about me. The quarrels with my stepmother, my explosive temper, the sex thoughts I could never control, every mean, selfish thought in action since the day I was born, and accepted and loved me just the same. When I say he knew everything about me, this was simply an observable fact, for into the room along with his radiant presence, simultaneously, though in telling about it, I have to describe them one by one, and also entered every single episode of my entire life. Everything that had ever happened to me was simply there, in full view, contemporary and current, all seemingly taking place at the moment. How this was possible, I didn't know. I had never before experienced the kind of space we seemed to be in. The little one-bedroom was still visible, but it no longer confined us. Instead, on all sides of us was what I could only think of as a kind of enormous mural, except that the figures on it were three-dimensional, moving and speaking. And many of those figures seemed to be me. Transfixed, I stared at myself standing at the blackboard in a third grade spelling class, receiving my Eagle badge in front of my scout troop, wheeling Papa Dabney onto the veranda at Ma's side. I saw myself a teeny 2.5-pound infant, panting for breath in an incubator. Simultaneously, there seemed to be no later. I saw myself lifted by a Parisian section from the womb of the ill and dying young woman whom I had never laid eyes on before. I saw myself a few months older, sitting on the lap of a kind-faced woman with silver-rimmed spectacles and a crooked nose. The 3-year-old girl playing on the floor beside us must be Mary Jane, though of course I couldn't remember her at that age, but Miss Williams looked exactly as I recalled her. She appeared in many of the scenes with a burst of long-forgotten yearning. I saw how much I loved her. Side by side with these scenes, I saw Dad bringing a tall defender brunette to Ma's side, the woman he was going to marry. I saw Mary Jane and me moving with them into the house at 4306 Brook Road. Saw myself standing fearfully at the dining room window, longing to go outside, but afraid of the boy next door. Along with cheerful scenes were miserable ones. I watched myself getting beaten up by that boy, watched the humiliation as my sister hurried from the house to fight my battle for me. I saw myself crying as Dad said goodbye for a week, 2 weeks, a month, his job forever taking him away. Much of the misery originated in me. I saw myself turning away when my stepmother bent over to kiss me goodnight. Saw the very thought itself. I'm not going to love this woman. My mother died. Miss Williams went away. If I love her, she'll leave me too. I watched myself at age 10 standing at that same dining room window while Dad went to the hospital to bring home Mother and out our new brother, Henry. Saw myself deciding before I ever saw him that I wasn't going to like this newcomer. There was other scenes, hundreds, thousands, all illuminated by the searing light, in an existence when time seemed to have ceased. It would have taken weeks of ordinary time even to glance at so many events, and yet I had no sense of minutes passing. I watched us move, the year I was 12, to a new house in the west coast end of Richmond. I saw the new bicycle Pap and Mama Dabney gave me. Saw myself 1,000 times biking across the railroad bridge to see them at Ma's side. I saw the afternoon I came home to the West End house to find the sidewalk littered with splinters of balsam wood, all that remained of the giant model airplane. I had glued together strip by painstaking strip. I watched my fury at 3-year-old Henry, who had committed this outrage, harden, as time passed, into a sullen withdrawal from the entire family. There were episodes from my high school years, dates, chemistry exams, running the fastest mile in the school. I saw my graduation day, saw myself entering the University of Richmond. And all the while, I watched myself hold my stiff-necked aloofness from Mother, from my brother, Henry, and even from little Bruce Gordon. I saw Dad coming home in his major's uniform, saw myself going down to the post office to enlist for active service. I watched the mustering in process at Camp Lee, watched myself and hundreds of others recruits boarding the train for Camp Berkeley. Every detail of 20 years of living was there to be looked at. The good, the bad, the high points, the run of the mill, and with this self-inclusive view came a question. It was implicit in every scene, and like the scenes themselves, it seemed to proceed from the living light beside me. What do you do with your life? What did you do with your life? It was obviously not a question in the sense that he was seeking information. For what I had done with my life was in plain view. In any case, this total recalling, detailed and perfect, came from him, not me. I couldn't have remembered a tenth of what was there until he showed it to me. What did you do with your life? It seemed to be a question about values, not facts. What did you accomplish with the precious time you were allotted? And with this question shining through them, these ordinary events of a fairly typical boyhood seemed not merely unexciting, but trivial. Hadn't I done anything lasting, anything important? Desperately, I looked around me for something that could seem worthwhile in the light of this blazing reality. It wasn't that there were spectacular sins, just the sexual hang-ups and secretiveness of most teenagers, but if there were no horrendous depths, there were no heights either. Only an endless, short-sighted, clamorous concern for myself. Hadn't I ever gone beyond my own immediate interests? Done anything other people would recognize as valuable? At last I located it, the proudest moment of my life. I became an Eagle Scout. Again, words seemed to emanate from the presence beside me. That glorified you. It was true. I could see myself standing in the center of the award circle, flushed with pride. The admiring eyes of my family and friends turned on me. Me, always in the center. Wasn't there any time in my life when I had let someone else stand there? I saw myself walking toward a church service at age 11, asking Jesus to be Lord of my life, but I saw how quickly that first excitement turned into a dull routine of church on Sunday. Worse, I saw the smugness and self-esteem that went with it. I was better than the kids who didn't come to church. I was even better than the lots who did there was my I was even better than lots who did there was my perfect attendance pin to prove it. Okay. I stared to point out my pre-med courses, how I was going to be a doctor and help people, but visible alongside the classroom scenes was this Cadillac car and that private airplane, thoughts as observable as actions in that all-pervading light. And all at once, rage at the question itself built up in me. It wasn't fair. Of course I hadn't done anything with my life. I hadn't had time. How could you judge a person who hadn't started? The answering thought, however, held no tract of judgment. Death. The word was infinitely loving, can come at any age. Well, sure, I knew that babies and little kids died. Somehow I had just always assumed that a full lifespan was in some way owed to me. What about the insurance money coming when I'm 70? The words were out in this strange realm where communication took place by thought instead of speech before I could call them back. A few months ago, I had taken out the standard life insurance policy offered to servicemen, and some subconscious part of me had I believed the piece of paper guaranteed life itself. If I'd suspected before that there was such there was mirth in the presence beside me. Now I was sure of it. The brightness seemed to vibrate and shine and shimmer with a kind of holy laughter, not at me and my silliness, not at mocking laughter, but a mirth that seemed to say that in spite of all error and tragedy, joy was more lasting still. And in the ecstasy of that laughter, I realized that it was I who was judging the events around us so harshly. It was I who saw them as trivial, self-centered, unimportant. No such condemnation came from the glory shining around me. He was not blaming or reproaching. He was simply loving me, filling the world with himself, and yet somehow attending to me personally, waiting for my answer to the question that still hung in the dazzling air. What have you done with your life to show me? Already I understood that it was my first frantic efforts to come up with an impressive answer. I had missed the point altogether. He wasn't asking about accomplishments and awards. The question, like everything this proceeding from him, had to do with love. How much have you loved with your life? How much have you loved with your life? Have you loved others as I am loving you? Totally, unconditionally. Hearing the question like that, I saw how foolish it was even to try to find an answer in the scenes around us. Why I hadn't known love like this was possible. Someone should have told me. I thought indignantly, a fine time to discover what life was all about. Like coming to a final exam and discovering you were going to be tested on a subject you had never studied. If this was the point of everything, why hadn't someone told me? But though these thoughts rose out of self-pity and self-excuse, the answering thought held no rebuke, only that hint of heavenly laughter behind the words. I did tell you, but how? Still wanting to justify myself, how could he have told me and I not heard? I told you by the life I lived. I told you by the death I died. And if you keep your eye on me, you will see more. With a start, I noticed that we were moving. I hadn't been aware of leaving the